Yo, what's good people, it's Wodzu here. A lot of people were asking me for that kind of video because today I'm going to tell you how I'm mixing my beats in the fast and efficient way. And by fast and efficient way, I mean quickly, and the result will sound pretty good. That kind of fast mixes will take from around 15 minutes to half an hour depending on the beat itself. And please keep in mind, the title of this tutorial is not how to make the most beautiful and the best mix in the world. My personal reason why I'm mixing my beats fast is because I have lots of other things to do during the week, including videos, including mixes for other people, including mixing lessons I'm giving. By the way, if you want a mixing lesson or if you need your stuff mixed, you can check the offer on my website. The first lesson is 50% off. And I am fully aware that you can spend like 3 or 4 hours mixing a beat, but most of the beats are pretty simple, to be honest. They don't have like 30 layers of instruments, it's not the orchestra, so let me show you how I do it. Here is one of the beats I've made in Reaper. It consists of 3 instrument buses I've made in Massive, so it has 3 melody layers, has a crash, some cymbals. All of those samples right here are just samples loaded into Resamplomatic 5000, and the bass is tweaked in Xfer Serum, and it sounds like that. Just a really simple 808 kind of sound. And here is the first phase, before we even start to thinking about volume, like should the snare be louder or quieter. And the first step is cleaning the sounds. And by cleaning the sounds, I mean getting rid of frequencies we don't really need. So we're going to be using high pass and low pass filters in the equalizer to get rid of the high end or low end. I will be using Re-EQ for this purpose. This is the basic equalizer from Reaper. Let's solo the kick and let's hear how it sounds like. This particular kick is really clicky, really snappy in the high end, so it's playing in the full spectrum. I don't really like that kind of EDM kicks. In trap beats, I prefer them to be more muffled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out all the higher frequencies using the low pass filter, the last one, number 4, and I'm going to cut it really hard and leave the filter at around 3K. Thanks to this, the kick will sound like that. It's still really punchy, really snappy, but it's not clicking, so it won't interrupt with other higher things like hi-hats, etc. The next thing I'm going to take care of is the snare. So we are soloing the snare, loading Re-EQ on snare, and let's listen to the snare. We definitely don't want this super low end in snare, so I'm going to cut it at around 100 Hz. Of course, now the snare has a little less bass, but it didn't change its sound like dramatically. And we will leave this space below 100 Hz for the kick, for example. And in my opinion, this snare is a little bit too bright, so I'm going to use the low pass filter right here and set it at around, I don't know, 18K, 18,000 Hz. Sounds much better and doesn't hurt my ears that much. Most of you people who are watching this video is probably above 20 years old, as my analytics say. So most of us is probably not hearing really well above 17K. Of course, depending on how we've been treating our hearing through the whole life. But it's never like, you know, you are hearing, here is 16K, 17K, and bam, you hear nothing. It's always like, you know, it goes down gradually. We're doing the same thing for the clap. I like to high pass the clap a little bit higher than snare, because this way the punch of the clap doesn't interrupt with the snare, especially in those claps which are playing with the snare itself at the same moment. But my claps in this case are a kind of a filler, so they are between the snares. So I'm not cutting out them like that or anything. I'm just leaving them around 200 or 300 Hz, so they have some of this really low middle frequencies. And now the hi-hats. Let's listen to the hi-hats. So as you can see, those hi-hats have a lot of frequencies through the whole spectrum, but we don't really need the bass from the hi-hats. This is not the place where they should be playing, so I'm cutting the hi-hats like a lot. Of course, if you want to preserve some of the snap in some hi-hats, you can set the filter a little bit lower, so there is a little bit more of those lower frequencies. But you certainly do not need anything below 1K in case of trap hi-hats. And that's how they sound like with the filter. Okay, and here I have some other things like cymbal and crash. And here the situation is really simple. I'm just setting the filter at around 1K. I'm high passing everything, and the same filter goes to crash and triangle, so they never interrupt with the beat. So that's how the drums with just filtered sound without the filters. And that's how they sound with the filters turned on. As you could hear, filtering off certain frequencies we don't really need made those drums sound a little bit more clean. And this is not supposed to be like, wow, they are so clean and it's done, it's mixed. This is only the preparation for the proper mix. So we don't have any things, any frequencies we don't want in our mix. Okay, let's move to the instrument layer. This is how it sounds like. Let's start from the pad. I've just used a high-pass filter because I didn't really need this deeper thing right here. It didn't really change the sound a lot, but it will make the low end more clear for the whole beat. Let's go to the lead number 2. Okay, that should do the job. And the lead number 1. Okay, and the last thing we're going to take care of is the 808, and it sounds like that. It has some of those higher frequencies right here, so I'm just going to cut them off and use the low-pass filter. That should do the job. There are no buzzing kind of frequencies anymore, so everything above 10K is cut off because that's the space for cymbals, hi-hats, for leads, that kind of stuff. Okay, so now as we took care of all the frequencies in terms of cutting the things we don't want to hear from the low end, from the high end, depending on the instrument or the drum, here comes the leveling. The leveling is just simply setting the volume of a certain element of the beat. So what I'm going to do, I'm setting all the volumes of all the things I have in the beat to 0, absolute 0. So when I play something, I hear absolutely nothing. Personally, I like to start the leveling from the drums. My mixing technique involves building your beat around the drums. So first I'm taking care of the drums. I make sure they are playing well, they are punchy, they are booming, they are fat, and I like them. And then I'm adding synthesizers, some other things, some ear candies, the 808 and stuff. So now let's move to the mixer. Here is the mixer. I keep it on my separate screen, and I'm going to be raising the volume of the kick until the peak of the kick is at around -12 dB. Okay, so as you could see, the kick at its maximum level is at -12 dB. This free area right here, so from -12 dB to 0 dB, is called headroom. It gives you an ability to fit some more elements into the whole mix, and it won't clip. So it's always good to stay at a little bit lower level when mixing. Now I'm going to set the level of the snare to the level of the kick, so they play well together. Of course, please keep in mind, this is not the final setup. We may change it a little bit afterwards, but this is just the basic mix right now, the basic mix of the drums. Now, the clap. I like to keep the clap a little bit quieter than the snare, because in this case it's a filler kind of clap and it's just playing between the snares. And the next step is the hi-hat. That should be okay. A really common thing among lots of producers who start out with mixing beats is that their hi-hats are far too loud. And if the hi-hat is too loud, it's just a really unpleasant thing for your ear, because you want to hear all of those different things in the beat, but the only thing you're hearing is like tick, 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 tick. Higher frequencies like hi-hats in this case can go through the whole beat a lot better than any other thing. So even though the hi-hat is a little bit quieter, you are still going to hear it. So don't worry about the hi-hat that much at this point. Now I'm going to mix the triangle and the cymbal. Since this triangle is already panned to the left, as you can hear, I'm going to pan this cymbal to the right a little bit more. So this way I have something playing here on the left and here on the right. And this creates a sense of space, so things aren't happening only in the middle. That's why there is panning, right and left channel. And the last step is this opening cymbal. I like to keep the opening cymbals, like the first hit of the cymbal in the sequence of the beat, really loud, because that's the energy, that's the bang, the opening. In my opinion, it should be huge, it should have an impact. Okay, now let's add the bass, the 808. If your room is not acoustically treated, your bass is sometimes super loud and super quiet. This means you have some mods in your room and you are not going to hear your bass properly. So my suggestion for mixing bass when you don't have an acoustically treated room is to use headphones. You can use any headphones you know, and you can just listen to some other songs and set the levels of the bass to levels similar as in the song played on those exact headphones. Before we move to the pad and the leads, the instruments, I'm going to apply the sidechain to the bass. I showed how to do it with the built-in recomp in my other video, so you can check it out right here. It's only a minute long, but in my production I'm using isotope neutron. I think the main advantage of using it is that I can just simply sidechain this one single frequency in the bass and I don't have to touch the rest of the bass. So I don't sidechain the buzzing side of the bass, like above 150 Hz. I'm only sidechaining the low end, the punch, the kick. And in order to do it, I'm just using the dynamic mode here with external input. I'm drag and dropping the kick directly to the plugin itself. I'm not sending any MIDI. And that's really it. Now it will just start to sidechain. Sounds okay. Now let's move to the pad and the leads. This pad is only like a background thing, so I'm not going to set it too loud. Now the lead. And now the main lead. Okay, sounds pretty good so far, but now I would just add some frequencies in the lead, because for now we didn't really boost anything. we just cut out the frequencies we don't really want to hear, but now we are going to add some frequencies to color up the sound. A really important tip right here is that you shouldn't really be adding frequencies when listening on solo. You are mixing, you are doing something in the context. You don't want to boost something and then unsolo it and you hear that doesn't really fit. So my recommendation is to always start adding frequencies when listening to the whole thing. Let's start from the main lead. As you can see, I've just made a white boost around 5K. When you are boosting sounds, I suggest making the boost really loud, so like 10 dB, and look for this exact sound you want to boost, because otherwise you won't really know how the frequency sounds like. If you are listening to something and you are dragging the filter, you will hear something that just sounds like nice. And some other frequencies will sound harsh, will sound boxy. You don't really want to boost them. And the second thing is, your boost shouldn't be really narrowed down. So I suggest making more wide boosts rather than some really narrowed down boosts like this, because when there are some other sounds being played, some of them will be boosted, some of them not. So that kind of filters, those really tight ones, are great for cutting out frequencies, some resonances, but I'm not going to talk about this in this video. Let's move to the lead number 2. In this case, I've just boosted some frequencies around 10K. So the previous boost on the first lead, the main lead, was around 5K. This boost is around 10K, so they don't really interrupt with themselves. There's some things boosted here and there. And thanks to this method, I just pulled out some characteristic sound from this one right here at 10K. And in this previous case, I pulled out those sounds at 5K, so they don't cover themselves. Okay, so that's how the beat sounds like after cleaning the sounds, filtering out certain frequencies, and leveling. And here comes the third phase of mixing, using sends for reverbs, delays, and other effects. This beat is not really deep in terms of space right now. It doesn't have any reverbs on drums, anything like that. Of course, there are some reverb from Massive right here, so here is some reverb, but I'm talking about drums more. The first thing you have to know, you do not use reverb on 808, bass, and on the kick, especially in those lower frequencies, but we are not going to talk about dividing frequencies and sending some frequencies to reverbs, anything like that today. Today we are mixing the fast and efficient way. I can talk about some more advanced techniques in some other videos. Let me just demonstrate. Let's send the kick to one of my reverbs and let's have a listen. Sounds just horrible. We are going to use some reverb for the clap, snare, hats, and maybe for the cymbal. So let's start from the snare. Here I have some reverbs I've prepared. I have a drum reverb, a vocal reverb, plate reverb, and a bright plate reverb. Those are just the reverb presets I'm using the most. In my case, I'm using two different plugins. For the drum reverb and the vocal reverb, I'm using the Epic Verb. It's a free plugin from the Variety of Sound, and for the plate reverbs, I'm using Arturia Plate 140. It's a really good reverb. Okay, so let's send the snare to one of those reverbs. Let's start with the drum reverb. It's a really short kind of reverb. You will hear. It's like a really small room which gives you an immediate response, so you can hear this reverb. So now I'm going to be lowering the portion of the signal I'm sending to this reverb until I stop hearing it. Okay, so at this point, I don't really hear the difference if it's with the reverb or without the reverb anymore. So from this point, I just like to pull it a little bit higher, so I hear a little more reverb. That's my way of setting the proportion of the reverb on this particular thing. Now let's send this snare to some other reverb, like plate reverb. It's much more huge. Now let's send the hi-hats to the plate reverb only. I'm going to use the same reverb settings for clap as I used for the snare. The reason I'm doing this is because the spectrum of clap and snare is pretty much similar, so I don't have to set them up separately. Okay, now the reverb for the opening crash and the cymbals. I like to use some more like a brighter and bigger reverb. So I have this bright plate reverb right here, which is really, really long. You will hear it. That's the opening crash without this reverb. And that's the crash with the reverb. It adds this space. What I also like to do is I like to send this opening crash to a delay send, quarter note delay send right here, and it sounds like that. It has some of those delayed reflections. And I'm sending the cymbal and the triangle to the same reverb. And now look at this master bus meter. We've started from setting the kick to -12 dB, but the whole beat, as we've mixed it with our ears, is a little bit louder. It hits like -6 dB. Let's see. And that's why you always should leave a little bit of the headroom. -6 dB or more, I like to aim for -12 dB. It's always safer. Okay, so the question is it mixed? Basically, yeah, we can call it a mixed beat, but I like to add some final touches to the beat itself. It's always good to take a little break now as you finished all of those steps I've mentioned here. Just do some other thing different than listening to music and then get back to this project.
20 minutes later.
And after a break, I can hear that this pad could be a little boosted somewhere because it's not really present in the space. I've just made a wide boost around 2 to 3K, something like that. So this pad sounds just warmer. And now some of more experienced beatmakers, producers watching this video may be asking themselves like, what about the exciter, saturation? What about the drum bass compression? What about the compression on the instruments? What about this, that, and that, and that, and that? Please keep in mind, this was the fast way of mixing beats, the fast and efficient way, so you can mix your beats really quickly and they sound really good. Most of the drum samples people are using nowadays are pretty much compressed and ready to use, let's say, so they don't really need to be processed really much to sound good. Of course, this beat can be mixed in a more advanced way, but this is not the topic for this video right now. If you want to ask about some particular things which aren't clear enough, you can ask your questions in the comment section down below. I'm going to make more videos like that, but I also would like to hear what do you want to hear about and what are your problems, what are your concerns with mixing your beats. I'm also going to make a separate video about really simple mastering, so your beats have a proper level for YouTube, Spotify, etc. And that's really it. I hope this video will help you make better music. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It helps a lot and it motivates me like crazy. See you in the next video on Wednesday. My name is Dominik, you've been watching Wodzu Beats, and keep the good vibes alive.